Welcome back to Off the Wire, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about a subject that I think is really close to Anthony and his heart, and that's taking our plans and our proposals, I guess, in IT and figuring out how to translate that and present that to either our CEOs or other executive leaders, and definitely to a board of directors if you have that at your business. But before we do that, if you're not already subscribed to us, please subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to us on now. We do have video podcasts available, so if that's your thing, you can do it on YouTube and obviously available on all the other audio platforms as well. And if you like what you hear today, share it with a colleague or a friend and help the podcast grow. So, Anthony, this is something, as I mentioned, it's really important to us. I think we've both lived it. We're trying to take a technology plan or a proposal and kind of talk to our leaders about it and kind of the things that are important to have when you're having that conversation. But I think, a lot of people kind of they go a little bit to that second step, right? Which is like, oh, okay, I need to propose whatever it is to a board, to maybe a senior IT leader if you're in a larger company, or to a CEO. And before they even get that far, they don't really have a fully complete, well thought out plan in place. So when you guys plan, I know we're going to talk a little bit about how each of us plan, but like, how do you guys plan from a technology perspective? Like, where do you start, or do you just kind of build on what you did last year? How does that look like with you guys?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of a multifaceted approach. We're always building upon what we did the previous year or the previous years, but we're also our company, and I know your organization does it too, but as a company, we do strategic planning, and information technology or technology has its own section, and we're looking to that as guidance along with some internal goals. We meet internally quite a bit, and we talk about the stuff that's working, the stuff that's not working, and how we can get better in all directions. And that has a lot to do with what we plan. But I would say the big thing is really just, and this has been really formalized in the last few years, is the company's strategic planning. And like from a company part, there's things such as like enhance our defense in depth, which we probably need to update to implement zero trust. That's the old school Emmy. We've got several cyber strategies for the organization. We're built on that, and we do update those items every year, and some of them kind of get carried over year to year. And then the other thing is just getting feedback from the other departments. IT is there. From my perspective, I think this is most people's perspective, is we're there to make the people either more efficient or better at their jobs. That's the whole point of having information technology. And not just people, also processes, make processes better, more meaningful and easier, and even automate stuff. So we speak to the other departments, get input from them. If they've got a direction they want to go into, we'll make that part of the plan.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think a lot of people, and even me, I think before I was in at least a manager level role, I think maybe you think about strategy a lot more, I think, when you start getting into like that first leadership role. But I didn't really realize how much work goes into the process. And if you don't have a process, obviously that's the first place you got to start. You need to have like an annual planning process at the very least. Ideally, looking into the future. I think trying to look a little further into the future than just the next year, a great place to start. We have a very similar planning process that we do with the group, just like you guys. We kind of start with 5 years. In technology world, I think that's maybe a little too long. So I kind of think of the things in like kind of 3 year windows for the long term, and then obviously kind of break it down into smaller chunks because you really got to get into your next year's plan. But now, I mean, it's been surprising to me in the time that I've worked in IT, the amount of times that everyone's strategic plan has a technology element. I don't know if that's something you've noticed too, but I remember when I first started, there were plenty of times where there was an initiative by another department and it really didn't involve us. Like we didn't have to be involved in the lease. And now it feels like we're kind of in everyone. Do you feel that same way?
All departments, whether they love or hate technology, like it or not, they've got us involved. And yeah, even operations, where just every aspect of our organization, they have to have someone from IT for the most part. In any big project, I would say they have to be involved. That's something we've really stressed too, though, with the leadership and the CEO is that we need to be involved. There's things like security, like we need to be involved up front. People can't just roll out or buy a new product without us evaluating. A lot of times they would reach out to us just to know if a system will work with our other systems. We need to get them in a mindset. IT doesn't need to just look at it from that aspect. IT needs to make sure that it's not going to bring risk to the organization that we don't want to deal with.
Yeah, and I mean, this is something I've been trying to do. I don't think we're there yet, but I think it's something that I want to do. I think a lot of times in the past, he has been like a checkoff box, right? Where it's like, okay, double check with them, be sure it's good. All right, it's good. Instead of maybe like more of a strategic planner of technology at the co-op. When I first started again, there was a lot of like a department would do something and then reference IT for basically like, hey, I need your help on this. And I've been trying to work our way there. Whereas like we're kind of strategic partners in this. And like I help guide where technology goes at the co-op just like you do, right? I mean, we're also I think that's just the trust level that we're finally getting. We kind of sandwich ourselves in IT a lot, thinking that, and obviously we are a support department, we're an admin department, and we're there to help the business. But at the same time, we know a lot about technology, and the more we understand the business, I highly encourage those out there. If you don't feel like you understand the business you're in, that needs to be like number one goal, because there's been many times where I was able to actually steer us in a better direction. There was a great idea by department. The initial design was this. I was able to kind of steer us into option B instead of only helping with figuring out option A, but I was able to actually say option A is good, option B is even better, and we all kind of agreed, oh well, option B is better. And I'm not saying that's because I have great ideas all the time, but just I think we need to go as technology strategic thinkers. We need to go from not only are we just helping out what people are asking of us, but we're also contributing in a strategic way to where the business goes.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that, but I also want to put that in the reverse is that when we roll out technology, we need to include people from other departments get feedback because they're going to be impacted by all those things. I know we can't do that for everything, but if you're doing a major project, it's really good to get the feedback from the departments as well. But yeah, having IT involved is definitely a good thing. And I think a lot of organizations are seeing that. And that's why, you see people at the C level with IT or a VP having a seat at the table with senior leadership. And I think those companies tend to be the stronger companies. No, that's not a diss to anyone that doesn't have that, but I do think overall you'll see that those organizations are typically a little stronger when they involve IT at the top.
No, I agree with that. And I'm seeing that more and more really regardless of industry. And I know we are trying, our focus is on small to medium business. I think there's a lot of inherent weaknesses, I think, whenever you have a smaller staff and you feel like you're kind of out of breath all the time, running it full 100%. But I have noticed even in the small medium business world that more and more I'm starting to see maybe not at the executive level, but definitely a sub department level. Definitely seeing that a lot more, and then a lot of executives as well. For those that are out there that maybe are just coming into that role, either you're kind of like leading a department, but you're still maybe right under another executive, or you've become like a fresh new technology executive. Start with that strategic plan. I think that's just such a critical thing, and work what you do off of that. We have a tendency, tech guys, we like shiny new toys. We have a tendency to see like, oh, what if I go down this direction? Instead of taking that business, where the business is going, the goals, aligning ourselves with that, and then making sure that our technology, not saying that we don't wiggle a little bit as we go down the road, but that we don't get too far out of the lines. Maybe to use like a coloring metaphor there. We want to kind of be close to the lines. We may go a little bit each way, but we don't want to get too far out of bounds on that. So Anthony, I know both of us do strategic planning, but you got your strategic plan. Like, how do you make sure you have everything that the business needs in that? I mean, you talked about interviewing people. Do you interview all levels? Do you interview like executive leaders like your CEO and try to understand like I mean everyone understands like some of the technology that's coming. Do you look to them and then say like, "Hey, what do you want us to like be looking at as well?"
Really, we interview all levels of employees. Honestly, I think some of the best things I've got from some of the people that are in the trenches, they see a lot of things that don't make it up the chain. So, like when we're doing our IVR, interactive voice response system, basically the automated part that you get on the phone. Like, I'll talk to the managers and the supervisors, but I'll also talk to some of our member service reps, and a lot of times they bring a lot of stuff that we all missed and have great information. But really, I think you're better off talking to all employee types at the company. I know it takes time, but really you can't go wrong by, talking from top to bottom about processes and stuff like that.
Now, I've been having some meetings this week actually with our front office staff. It is tough. I mean, as any position, not just as a leader in technology, it is tough to take all that time because it does take time. I mean, I've been looking to go out and meet with some of the front office staff at our district offices, and some of our offices are a couple hours away. You got to get up early. I mean, I think one of them I'm like leaving at like 5:30 in the morning to get there so I can be there before they start work so that we don't impact kind of the normal work day. And that's tough. And that not necessarily something you want to, at 5:30 you wake up and you're like, I'm so excited to drive 2 hours now. But so far I've done two out of the four and it's paid a lot of dividends. Been able to see kind of what they're experiencing, what's going right, what's going wrong, but also kind of talk about some of the direction. Like I've been talking a little bit about AI with each group, and some people are nervous, obviously. I mean, everybody, I think there's some level of nerves, but some of these people are really nervous. They don't understand it. They don't understand the power of it, like how it can help them, but they also are scared of like what it can do. They're afraid to even use the technology because they're worried to death they're going to accidentally share something they shouldn't. So being able to have like a conversation and say like, this is where, as part of leadership, this is where we see AI going within the company. You can see like it does, like you can even see it in their eyes a little bit. Like they were like, oh, okay. Like they understood it a little bit more, but also they were like, they didn't have that like uneasiness of like, are they going to try to replace us with technology or something like that? So I found that to be very useful. And it is tough. I've tried to do as much as I can. I've been expanding it each year, but it is a lot. It is a lot. And I don't know. I'm trying to figure out a good way. Maybe you have a good way of trying to be able to collect feedback throughout the year too. So it doesn't feel like I have to take a month just going and talking to people. But maybe there's a good way. Do you guys have anything? I mean, other than just conversations to have, do you have any like way for people to give you suggestions throughout the year on what you things you might want to do?
Yeah, so one thing, and we're actually looking at picking this up. This is for the company as a whole, but the CEO will hold a brainstorming session and we'll kind of break up into smaller groups and then meet as a big group and just, talk about how things are going. Like, is there anything that is impeding people from doing their job? And just kind of brainstorming it as a group, and a lot of things come out, some good, some bad, but you'll see the co-op become stronger, after going through that and making a few changes. And the other thing, just to kind of touch on with communication, I think having those informal communications do a lot. And outside of getting ideas, I think it shows that you care and you respect people's opinions. So I think that means a lot. A lot of times I think we struggle with is people really just opening up to us and know that they can talk to us and communicate with us. Even people that are having technical issues, like they're very reluctant to reach out. So we're trying to have a lot of those informal conversations and we'll make sure people feel comfortable communicating with us.
No, I mean, and I think if you're listening or watching us out there, and maybe you're at entry level position still, don't think that you can't do this as well. Don't think this is only like something that your IT leadership should do. When you're having this conversation, in fact, you almost have better opportunity than anyone to do it. When you're having those conversations with people, like, hey, how are things going? Like maybe you fix a problem and you're like, how's everything else? This is little things that can help you gain some information, be able to share that maybe with your supervisor and say, hey, like people, I'm hearing this. I'm hearing that like XYZ software isn't working as it should, or that they're having. And there's hardly anything more powerful than to hear input from someone and that you on your own go and try to fix the problem and then to find out about that later. I mean, I think that builds a level of trust that is going to help you out. I have kind of a saying with IT is like good service every day is kind of like filling up a cup. And then every once in a while we have to remove a little bit from that. Maybe it's MFA. Maybe it's something nobody really wants to do. I mean, nobody enjoys MFA. Nobody gets excited in the morning. Oh man, I get to two factor three times a day. But it's what we're required to do. It's become part of kind of table stakes now. So that's a withdrawal. So we want to make sure the cups are really full. And one of the ways we can do that is by listening, number one, and then by taking input and putting that into action. So we have a plan. We've talked to leadership. We talked to our front office people. We've kind of taken what we thought, maybe changed the plan a little bit and tried to refine it. But obviously, when we're presenting a plan, a strategic technology plan, we have to do that usually to a CEO or, in our case, within our industry, to a board of directors that kind of oversees the company. What do we? I mean, obviously, we have the technology piece. Like, we want to use this technology, we want to use that technology, but like boards and CEOs don't always think in pure technology form. Like, what do we need to like make sure that we put in our plans or our proposals to be sure that they get the check off?
Yeah, when talking to your senior leadership or your board of directors, you can go on forever about some awesome technology or some tool, and in the back of their mind, they're thinking of what is this going to cost the whole time. And I think we have a tendency to cover that at the end, but I'm almost tempted to start flip flopping that because I can't help it. I do this myself. We're talking about some technology, and then the whole time I'm like, man, this sounds expensive. And, like, that's what I'm repeating in my mind the whole time. So, you definitely wanna talk about the financial impact and the cost. If you can do a return on investment, you wanna show what that is. You just wanna communicate the financials to the leadership board of directors. What risk and liability, that's what a lot of people ask me, and they don't really like this answer, though, but they're like, "Is this gonna increase our risk?" And I do start off I have a broad statement. Anything we implement brings risk to our organization. It's just how much does it, and what's the liability? If we don't do this, what's the liability? If we don't roll out two-factor, what's the liability? I mean, we all know that's substantial. Leaders, they wanna know how it's gonna impact them from a risk and liability. And then also the leadership and the board of directors, they care about the employees and they wanna know what the impact is gonna be. When you're talking about technology and if you're going down all the technical things it'll do, in the end, they really just wanna know how's it gonna impact the people that you're rolling it out to.
Yeah, I mean, especially boards of directors, they have a lot of thoughts about risk. Like we recently presented kind of on this topic, and one of the things we learned, we did a little survey before, but one of the things we learned is like boards are very defensive in mindset. They want to protect what's there at the company. Obviously, they want to grow, right? Whether it's a board for a nonprofit or a for-profit, they want to grow the company. But at the same time, they want to protect what's there, right? I kind of think of it like they're like the castle guardians, right? And they want to make sure that like there's no holes. We don't gotta and kind of so risk and liability. That's just such a key thing to them. And obviously, cost always plays a role. You talked about that, and I always think it's kind of funny. Sometimes when we are proposing a technology, we want people to not care about the cost, and yet whenever we're listening to a demo, the first thing we're thinking about is the cost. So, Anthony, you and I have talked a lot about kind of when you're presenting, you've got your plan, right? The actual technology parts of it. Then you got like the things you need to include. We just talked about costs, the risk, the impact that's going to happen, especially your customers, members, also employees as well. But me and you have talked a lot about like how you say something is a big deal, right? You've mentioned it to me a lot about how it's tough for you. It's also tough for me to like take the technical stuff out of what we're trying to say when we're reporting or we're trying to get something approved. Talk a little bit about that. Like, how much technical, I guess, kind of technical talk do we need to include, or do we need to stay away from being pretty technical when we're presenting these kinds of things?
Yeah, actually, our, interview we did with Fleetus just a few episodes back, one thing that he mentioned was the curse of knowledge. I never heard that term, but that's 100% what it is. And I used to think I was in particularly bad when I worked at Hewlett Packard. It was nothing but IT people that I worked with. We were all technology people, but I learned that it's really not. It isn't just me. It's the whole industry. When we talk to each other, IT talking to IT, or just technical people talking to technical people, I think we do a great job. But when you're talking to the CEOs, the other departments, and your board of directors, you really need to step back and think of things from their shoes. I know everyone's heard this. Try to stop using acronyms. If you have to use an acronym, spell it out and keep jargon to a minimum. If you've ever heard any IT person, like, we're not good at doing that. So I know we all hear it, but you need to think about that with every single thing you do. I'll give an example. So if I went up to the board of directors and say we're doing a budget, and say, "Hey, we're wanting to roll out this MDM so we can maintain and update your iOS devices." I guarantee there's someone out there has said that to a board of directors. Like, that's definitely been said at some point. Like, they're not going to understand what the heck you're talking about. You need to break it down into smaller things. And just one of the things that my CEO, he brought it to my attention, and it's that whole curse of knowledge thing. I was talking about network switches, and I just take for granted that everyone knows what a switch is. Well, and this isn't any it isn't an issue, it's just it's my issue is, like, I've got board members that are farmers, have been farmers their whole life, and the only smart device that they've ever had is the iPad that we issue them. Do they know what a switch is? They probably don't. So even simple things like that. I know that's kind of like a basic thing for IT, like we deal with network switches every day, but you need to break those things down and explain those. So if you're going to use jargon, make sure you explain it. When you're communicating with people, if you can put yourselves in their shoes, it'll help you give you a leg up. So if you kind of know a little bit of their background and what they're looking for, it'll help you communicate with them. If I'm speaking with a gearhead or a car person, I know I can use car analogies with them. If we're talking about troubleshooting an item, I can say it's just like a car that won't start. It's either air, fuel, or spark. It'll just help you communicate with them if you put yourselves in their shoes. And then just going into the appropriate level of detail, I know we've all been around someone. There's always someone out there that we know that goes into the such detail that everyone that talks to them checks out. I think we've all got one of those people that we know. But with IT, you definitely need to know where that's at, and that's really just knowing who you're communicating with. So for like at my organization, our CEO 2 years ago, like he rolled out a camera system and camera systems are very technical and very IT oriented. And so if I'm talking with him, like if I'm talking about the network, I can go into a decent level of detail. On the flip side, if I'm presenting to the board of directors, I can't go into that detail. I need to keep it to where, what I'm speaking with them about, how does it align to the business? What's the impact of the business? Really just focus on that or bring it to a risk level or something like that, something that they're interested in and want to hear about.
Yeah, that's tough for us, right? I mean, we have a ton of acronyms in our world, and it's tough. I will say on the acronyms front, over time you can educate your board or your CEO or whatever on an acronym, but just know it's not going to happen one time. Like to your point, that cursory knowledge, well, you know what MDM is. In fact, in our industry, there's two, and they're both related to software. But you know what that is, right? They don't know what it is, but you can talk about it over time. If it is something like, I'm not saying MDM is like maybe critical to the technology strategy of the company, it's probably a piece, but if it is something that's really important that's going to come up over and over, you can educate them along the way and just make sure that you do it in a way that everyone kind of keeps up. But eventually you can get to a point where you maybe can use an acronym, but you got to make sure that you've explained it many, many times to where everyone fully understands it. And that can potentially help you down the road. I know with some of our critical software, I mean, our board members do have there's probably 4 or 5 acronyms of some of our critical software that they know, but that only happened because of repetitive use for probably years and years. So that's just something to think about too. So I think we've talked a little bit about having a plan, making sure that we have the pieces, the technology pieces. Obviously, that's where we start, right? Making sure they're aligned to business, but also kind of the cost, the risk, all those kinds of things. And then maybe making sure we're saying it in a way that's understandable. If something's not understandable, people are going to forget about all that other stuff, the cost, the risk. And so make sure it's understandable. But something that I'm pretty passionate about is what you do with it after you've gotten. So let's say you've gotten that approval of those plans, right? A lot of times, what we do is we take, and this happens not just on strategic plans, but I have this happen sometimes when I task others with, and I've had it happen when I was the person getting the task. You get the task, go ahead and complete the task, and then you just go about your day. And there's never like that feedback loop back in. As someone who's delegated a lot of tasks, at least recently, obviously in my role, that puts me in this weird spot where I'm like, okay, I think they did it, but I'm not sure they did it. But I care about the users. You care about the users. You need to verify that they did do it. But like, how long do I wait? Do I give them a couple weeks? And then it just creates this extra process. So something that we need to make sure that we think about. We need to spend at least some time not only working the tasks that were at a hand in our strategic plans, the proposals we've gotten approved, but figuring out how can we come up with a good feedback loop. Maybe for you it's quarterly, for me it's quarterly with our board, and probably more often with the other executives on the team and our CEO, of course. but figure out what's a good feedback loop to make sure that you are keeping them in tune with those strategic plans, how they're going, what have you completed, what struggles have come up, maybe there's been delays, all that stuff. Very passionate about that because I've been on both sides of it, right? Where you're being the one tasked with a strategic task, and then you're the one coming up with a strategic task. And that feedback loop is critical to making sure that things work very efficiently. If you don't, you're going to have a lot of check ins. And we talked about project management. We talked about that in our last episode. That could be a way to create that feedback loop. Maybe you automate it, but there needs to be some sort of feedback loop that lets people know whenever these strategic tasks are being completed and you're advancing toward your goal.
Yeah, the one thing that I don't know how many times I've heard it, we did some major project and there'll be and this isn't necessarily leadership, but I've seen it like, "Oh, I didn't even know that was done." Or that's something so it's definitely important that you're communicating that and keeping everyone on the same page.
Well, Anthony, I mean, I think strategic plans, I think it's something that's I'm pretty passionate about, especially now in my current role. I know you're passionate about it too. If you had to give anybody like a tip, like is there anything like off the top of your head? We talked about obviously the process that we work through, working through strategic plans, doing those interviews, presenting to our leadership and what we include on those, and then making sure we have that feedback path. Is there anything, any just like tip that comes off the top of your head that you're like, man, just remember this little key tidbit as we kind of wind down the episode here?
Yeah, the big thing I think is communications. You need to keep things simple and speak in a way that they understand. So, like, if I'm talking with our networking folks, I'm going to talk about network switch about, hey, this is going to give us, we're going to go from 1 gig to 10 gig throughput on this backbone. If I'm talking to the CEO and board of directors, they don't need to hear that. Like, they're not going to care about that. And usually, when we're rolling out any IT project, there's going to be many reasons we do it. So, like with the network switches, I could spin it two other ways. I could say, hey, these network switches are end of life, and that means that they're no longer going to get security updates. If you're talking to your CEO and board of directors, they're going to most likely back cybersecurity items. And if you got strategic planning talking about cybersecurity, you can align to that. Or if you guys are focusing on disaster recovery, don't say, hey, we're going to go from 1 gig to 10 gig backbone. Say, hey, this will reduce our recovery time by 75% by implementing these new switches. The things that we do, think about how it impacts the business specifically. Think in terms that your leadership and your board of directors are thinking in.
That's a great point. The only other tip I guess I would add, and this is something that I learned kind of, or I kind of knew it, but someone really put it into a good perspective for me recently, was yeah, especially on the cybersecurity side. I think we get sucked into this a little bit. It seems like everything that we put out on the cybersecurity side, and maybe even in some other areas with AI, the first thing it feels like we come out with is a way to restrict it, to make it confined and make it, a lot of that's protection. Maybe with AI, it's like we don't want to get our data out there in the public cloud or things like that. But make sure we're kind of framing things in a way that people understand like why that has to happen and that it's actually enabling them to do what they want in a better way. People want to understand from an IT group how they're enabling them to do more with their job, like to make it more efficient, to have some sort of feature that they didn't have. People don't get really excited when we talk about how we're going to restrict what they're doing. And we know that, especially in the cybersecurity side, that's part of it. And that sometimes we have to put in restrictions, but we need to figure out how to help them understand why the restriction is a benefit and not just here's a restriction. So, and that kind of goes for a lot of things. I know we've talked about maybe doing an episode on shadow IT, and I think it leads right into that as well, which is if you say no over and over and over, and there's a need, people are going to figure out a way to do it either within your environment, hopefully, at least you might be able to detect it, or on their own. So when you're actually having to do something that's restricting, show how it actually can be enabling. And then, honestly, I think a tip that someone gave me, especially in the IT world, but not just the IT world, I think this works at every team level, is talk to people about the why. If people know the why, they're willing to do a lot of things. But if you just tell them this is how it's got to be without explaining the why, they start asking questions and they maybe potentially don't join you and they don't get quite as on board as they would have. So I would just add that. All right. So Anthony, I enjoyed talking strategic planning with you. It was pretty neat. I know we both have, I wouldn't call it the exact same process, but we have kind of a similar process we go through. And again, to anyone listening or watching, if you don't have that in place, that is like foundational ground zero. You've got to start there. If you don't strategically plan your technology, you're likely to go all over the place. And you want things to kind of always be pushing you forward toward the business goals. So do that first. And then once you've done that, come back to this episode and listen a little bit about some of the other things you need to include. And then to Anthony's point, he talked about this earlier, do a lot of interviews. Let your users and your leadership be part of the process of planning and kind of every year include them, and you're probably going to get a lot more buy-in. If you have any episode ideas for us or just some feedback for us, shoot us an email. We do have an email, show@offthewirepodcast.com, or you can reach out to us on any of our social media channels as well. Until next time, this is episode Off the Wire.